Welcome back to Hot Rod Guy Garage. This is going to be another episode on the 65 Mustang. So follow me along through the intro and I'll be back. Alright guys, it has been a week since we had got parts for the 65 Mustang. So I made another parts order with Kentucky Mustang. So make sure you check them out guys at KentuckyMustang.com. They have sent a discount code for you guys to use. I'll drop that right here. But it has been a little while. I have ordered some more pieces. I've got all the stuff to put the dash together. All the dash switches, the ignition switch, radio, glove box stuff. You know, all that fun stuff that takes forever to put together. But first, we're going to start off with some other things. Now, I've got the grill for it. I ordered the grill trim and all that kind of stuff. We're going to get that stuff in this video too. But the first thing I want to address is one thing that is always a big question with these cars and when you replace the cowl, especially on an early car. Your early cars have a bezel and a nut that goes on the wiper stalk. As you can see right here, it's threaded. Cars like my 66 over here do not. And the cowl is actually made different around through here. And a lot of your reproduction stuff won't accept the early style bezels and nuts, like these right here. So I'm going to show you the part number. These are for 64.5 and 65 only. 66 does not take these. These are the nuts. They sit on there and they cover up that big old tall threaded shaft that sticks up ugly. When I got to 66, they cleaned that whole area up a whole lot different. But when you put these on guys, and this is what we're going to start out with today. We're going to put these on there just because I need to make sure they will fit with our aftermarket cowl. There is a tool to drive these. And this thing is important to have and it makes it a ton easier. I'm also going to drop part number to it right there. So there's both of them in the same shot. If you need either one of those, make sure you pause it. So some things have changed also in the background. I have got a new phone, so our time-lapse stuff is a little bit different than what it usually is. So I need your feedback down in the comments below what you think about the new stuff. But let's get these wiper bezels and nuts on there. I'm going to bring you along for a driver's side and I'll put you on time-lapse for the other one. So guys, these things are pretty easy to put on there. There will be a notch out in the back. There's a keyway on your wiper shaft. So basically, it sits in there like this with the big fat end towards the top. And it's going to sit down in there like that. So I wanted to make sure these would work with our aftermarket cowl and sit down in there correctly because there is some horror stories about them not working. If they didn't, it was just going to be ugly like it was before. So this car has never had these bezels on it since it's been at my shop. But you're just going to take this tool and it lines up with the little notches in that bezel and you get it down in there and just snug it up. There's no need to cram this thing down there and make it super tight. It's not keeping any water or anything out. It's literally just a dress-up piece. But you can definitely tell when it's in there and when it's not. And I've had some people say stuff like, oh, there's chips in the car. And some of the other videos, guys, it is dirt. It is dirty. Very dirty. The car is. Remember that brake we had to take with it? Yeah, the car got dirty during that period. And I've still got a wet sand and buff it. So I'm not going to put things like the outside mirrors and door handles and stuff on it yet until after I get the car back together and I get it buffed. But stuff like these bezels and the window trim, I am going to go ahead and put them back on. So let's get this other one on there and we'll move on to our next thing. So, looks so much better with those things on there than it did before without them. So, our next thing, I did get a set of reproduction wiper arms and correct looking blades. So those wiper bezels, guys, are super easy to put on there. And like I said, they don't need to be much more than just hand snug. You can turn them a little bit more with range. I don't suggest cramming them things down in there because you can bend your cowl, you can damage the wiper stalk. They just need to be down far enough it clears your wiper blade. You know, that way you don't have no clearance issues. So that's why that needs to be our next thing put on. So it does make me feel better to put stuff back on this car that it didn't have before, because those little things make the world of difference. So let's get these wiper blades opened up. I'll flip it around and we'll go from there. So here's our next thing, guys. I got the original style wiper arms and wiper blades instead of the part store ones this car had on it before. So here's part numbers. You're looking for some. And these are different from the 66 ones yet again. And I'm sure I'm going to have somebody say, well, these aftermarket wiper blades don't clip together. You are absolutely right. They do not. They don't lock on, right? I'm going to show you how to fix this. Because no matter what you do, if you actually use these, they'd look all pretty on the car as long as you didn't touch them. If you use them, they're going to fall apart. Instead, I figured out how to fix them for y'all. That's not going to fall off. So let me flip around. I'll show you the mods I had to do to make this happen. So this is going to be very simple, guys. Like I said, this one's locked in. What you're going to do, you can go to the bottom of your new wiper. See these tabs? You see they're not flat, right? First thing you're going to do is take a very small pair of pliers. And if you're worried about marring it, cover the top. But it don't take much to push these little tabs down. And to do it without any damage. Without any kind of scratching to the top side of it. So what that does, that's going to pull this in a little tighter on the sides. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go in here and just lightly touch. And that is still not going to be enough for it to lock on. Alright, it fits tighter, but it don't lock on. And the reason why it don't lock on is if you hold this wiper arm up here, you see the notch right here. The bump up. That right there is why. You're going to have to cut the end of this off. About 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. And then you're going to have to taper this profile slightly. The good thing is, this appears to be stainless steel. If you're worried about corrosion and rust, after you do this, you can take some clear nail polish or, you know, some clear coat spray paint and just spray from here up. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this off a little bit. And then I'm going to thin the tip of it down. Only on this side. I'm going to reduce. I'm going to taper it this way. Because what's happening, and I don't know if I can show you from this side, but when this thing goes in here, and you're trying to get up there where it'll lock in, it's actually bottoming out up in here in your spring clip, and that won't let it lock in. So let me cut this off, and then I'll come back and I'll show you what I've done. I'll show you how it locks on. And alright guys, as you can see, I profiled that down a little bit. And yes, it did discolor it a little bit. But once you do that, you need to get it up in here and you need to make sure it'll go past. And once you get in there and you get it locked in, there you go. I'll come in here and I'll bend these tabs on down a little bit. Just enough to hold some extra tension on that clip. As you see, it won't come out, but you can still pick this up and it'll come apart as normal. But it will lock in and won't come off. It won't fly off your car going down the road. So guys, if that trick right there don't save a bunch of people a bunch of hassle, it'll really surprise me. Just take your time, guys. And if you want to tighten up the side to side dimension, just give it a little squeeze. You know what I mean? Just a little squeeze. And that'll get rid of any kind of funny business you got going on. Then when you put this on there, you don't have all this nasty black is part store stuff on there. And with these, you can also put a refill back in them. So I know this has been a big problem with early Mustang stuff, but it's really as simple as that right there. Should they fit out of the package, considering they're in the same package together and it all clipped together? Absolutely. But with reproduction stuff, guys, you just kind of got to feel this stuff out. And if it don't fit, you need to slow down, back up, and figure out why. So hopefully that trick will save y'all some hassle and some time, and also keep you from putting old nasty parts store wiper blades on your classic Mustang. And I think the next thing we're going to go put on is going to be our grill moldings. I'm going to go ahead and get the grill and stuff in it. So these are reproductions right here. That's the right hand side. That's the left hand side. So let me get these opened up. We'll get them on the car. And I had a feeling this is going to be an episode of having to fix reproduction stuff so it actually fits on the car. So I'm going to flip around and show it to you, but there's definitely going to be some issues with the grill moldings. So it should be easily addressed with a little touch and care, but I'll flip around and show it to you. Gap. Big gap. Yep, there's definitely some fitment issues there, and I've just got it set on there. But what we're going to have to do, we're going to have to gently bend this grill molding to fit the curvature of the aftermarket grill molding to the aftermarket headlight bucket. So, it should be a lot of fun. So guys, as you've seen, we have a fitment issue, and it's because of this angle right here. So what we're going to have to do, we are going to have to kind of see how it flexes when it's in position. And we may have to just lightly tweak it a little bit. So to say. You don't get too wild with it, but you just want to kind of get a feel of what you got going on. Maybe a little flex it around a little bit as needed. The old double don't fit problem. So a lot of our misfitment is both in the headlight bucket themselves, the headlight mounting buckets, and the grill trim. So I'm going to flip around and I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to show you the differences between these two and the difference between the ones that were on the car before, which I'm still not sure of factory ones, but there's a lot of differences. And the biggest thing note right here, guys, you see where the screw hole is for your trim, and your trim screws into that screw hole right there. You see it. You can see we got a fairly decent fitment. It ain't great, but when it's screwed down, it'll fit. These were the moldings that were on the car. They're pitted and all scratched up. Beat all to death. So, this is the important part. And so is this. You look at the shape of this. I've got this one mounted. You look at the shape of this. It's a different shape. It's close, but it's different. I had to drill a hole right here. You can see the screw hole that was already in those. Let me move this one. This one's in the right spot. This one is not in the right spot. And those holes were already in it. So that just adds a new level of fun. So everything else seems to line up pretty well. But if you got aftermarket headlight housings and aftermarket grill trim, you are going to have to do some fitment. Took me a little while to figure it out, guys. But now that I got it figured out, the other side will go easy, and everything should go together from here pretty decently. So I'm going to put y'all back on the stand. Let's see if we can't get the other side mounted. And alright, after you get these to fit up decent, your grill bar covers the center. If you don't have a grill bar, or you're putting a Shelby style grill in the car, you will need this part number right here. And it is this piece right here. It has a self-cutting nut. And the best way to deal with these is to go ahead and thread them on there off the car. Or sometimes your stuff just don't fit together at all. This stud could use to be just a touch longer. Just a touch. And would make it a lot easier. So I'm gonna have to refigure the wheel here, and then I'll be back. Alright, so I got it all bolted up, all fitted up as decent as it's gonna get. I think 99% of our evil are these aftermarket headlight buckets that I'd got from CJ Pony Parts. Y'all have to go back to one of those videos and see exactly what the part numbers were on them. But if you remember, they fit hardly and horrible. So let me flip around. I'll show you where I'm at, and we'll go from there. So this is our fitment. It is not perfect. It is not great, but it is acceptable. The molding herself are pretty nice. Matches the silver and the other piece perfectly. So that grill piece deletes the grill bar. So if you're putting a Shelby style grill or a plain grill or a 66 grill, you got to have that piece. So got all that in. I've got a new grill here. We need to see how it's going to fit, and hopefully a lot better than the rest of this stuff, and see if we can't get it in there. This is what you run into, guys, with the aftermarket pieces and parts. This is what you do. You just got to make it work, and you got to figure out how to make it work. And you just got to do it. You can't fully mock up a car before you paint it, or, you know, you put this stuff on. Well, you could if you had a ton of money and you had all the new stuff sitting around. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you just work with what you can get at the time. And the problem is, a lot of times the stuff's just a little off or a lot off, and you don't realize until you go and putting it on there. So you just have to kind of try to shoot for whatever the best fitment you can get is. So I've got our new grill. These things come, they more than likely are going to have a little tweaking to do to fit the car. These things are like very, very thin mesh. They're going to screw in here, 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 there, and up there. So what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to put y'all on the video. Let's see if we can get this thing in there. I got the correct mounting screws, so let's hope for the best. was one thing that actually fit fairly well and went fairly smoothly. It looks pretty decent around through there. And definitely looks a lot better up here. Well, it's the next day. One aftermarket part wouldn't be fun if you don't always fight with stuff. This part of it, guys, just feel fortunate to even get stuff, because there's a lot of cars out there that stuff's not reproduced for and you're literally having to restore it. So our grill's in, our grill trim's in, our wiper blades, wiper arms, you know, all that stuff, bezels. So there's one more thing to finish off this grill. So let me flip around and show it to you. So what I got here is a driver's side running horse emblem. This will be the same as what's on the driver's side of your fender. Right here. This is what the GT350 cars had in the grill for 65 and 66. You can buy the correct tabs to mount this in the grill. This will not come with this. I have made a retainer using inserts to go in the fender. I have made just a little simple retainer right here that covers the back side, and this will be more than sufficient. So let's get this thing installed. I'll show you the correct placement for a Shelby car and we'll go from there. But first, one thing I didn't show you was the part number. The same as left-hand fender emblem. And the correct placement for said emblem. You can see where your grill bar mounts right here. This bracket, the bottom of this is going to be flush. And it comes right up the side of that bracket right there. You see the gap, push it over. That right there is the correct placement. Just like that. So if you're going to get technical, from that edge, that's 1, 2, 3, 3.5 honeycombs from the bottom. And that will be your correct placement for that emblem. And to install it, I'm not going to video me installing it, but I made this off a copy of the fender. This is this little piece of bar that I painted black. This is just going to push on to the back side of the grill while you hold the front side of the emblem. Kind of like putting the fender emblems in, guys. It'll just push right on. So once I get that in there, I'll be back. Well, that looks better already. So I guess our next thing is we need to get them parking lights in there. Go ahead and get this front wiring and lights and stuff wrapped up. But it does look a lot better. It's starting to look like a car again. So our next thing, and I got this laid out. Kentucky Mustang sells this as a kit. This is everything for the front parking lights. Your housings, your nuts, your body gaskets, your lens gaskets, your bulbs, and the lenses. I will drop a part number of this kit's part number right about right here, or a screenshot of it. But let's get this stuff unpacked and start getting it ready to go in the car. So we've got the parking lights assembled, or at least one of them. This is the right hand one. The gasket goes on the back side. There's a little notch cut out in that gasket. There's a little notch down here on the very bottom. Notch to notch. But if you look at his old stuff that was on the car, and really look at it, this stuff, why, would have looked alright with a new set of lenses and a daily driver, you know, rough old car or something like my 66. They'd look awesome. These things were in very poor shape, packed together with various, you know, pigtails and other things run off of them. It's better just to replace them as an assembly, because this stuff is in pretty bad shape. Didn't have the right mounting hardware. You know, had two of the right nuts, but the other two were wrong. And I just bought the whole kit. The only thing this kit doesn't come with is the retainers that go on the back side. So I had to go extract these out of his old valance panel to get the retainers. I've got them cleaned up and I've got them drying now. On the R style valance, you will have to open these holes up, and I could have opened them up before I painted it, but I was hoping maybe they would fit. But you see the driver's side, I've already opened up the passenger side. I have to open that hole up about an inch. Always mock your stuff up, guys. When you don't, you run into stuff like that. I wasn't real worried about it because I knew I was going to have to open it up. And what I used was just my air die grinder and a bit. I just went in there carefully and just worked my way up to it until I could get one of these old parking lights to fit in the hole snugly. So much so that you could probably just push it in, it wouldn't ever fall out. But I got it snug. You could loosen it up a little bit where it come in and out easy, but I wanted mine snug. So once those bezels dry, well, not bezels, but the retainers dry, I will be back, guys. I'm gonna get these things put in. All right, got the retainers cleaned up and painted. The best they're gonna clean up. But these things go on the back side like this, and you sandwich this and this in between there to create a seal there and hold this light in. So let's get in there. Well, that looks a lot better. Looks more like a car. And when you get them things tightened down, they should be flush. You shouldn't see any gasket, or as close to flush as they will sit. These are very, very tight. And they screw in from the back side back here. See the position of our retainer. And there's a little rubber grommet on that wiring harness. They should ideally push up in a fender. But these being Taiwan fenders, the little grommet kind of fits a little loose. So I'm going to have to probably either shove it up through the hole, this where the wires won't dangle and get caught in the tire or anything else, or going to have to glue it in. So I think we're going to go with the push it through the hole and let it hold the wires up from the inside method on this one. So let me get the other side ground out and then I'll be back. All right, I think it's about time we get the trunk light stuff in this car. So I got everything cleaned up in the background, and blasted and wire brushed and cleaned up and painted. So let me flip it around and I'll show you what we got to replace and what we're replacing and what we need to do to assemble all this stuff. So what we got, I cleaned up our striker plate, I cleaned up our latch, I cleaned up our spacer that goes behind our trunk bezel. I've got a new bezel, gasket, new lock. That is just some sticky stuff from the tape that was on it, and some new bolts. So I'll show you the part numbers for the bezel stuff. It is right here, the bezel kit. It does not come with the spacer. That's very important to note. I bought a door ignition and trunk lock set. That way we go back to just having 2 keys. This old stuff, it's in pretty bad shape. Same with the locks. That's why I just ordered a whole new lock set for it. They don't look so great. They're bent up. And of course hardware's not no better. So you can imagine what this stuff looked like. It was, you can see the pits where they've been cleaned out. That's what all this stuff looked like. So the only thing you're going to reuse is this right here, the spacer, unless you buy a new one, and this rod right here. This rod is very important, and this is what actuates your trunk latch. This is your mechanical link between your key and your latch. So let me show you how to put this stuff together. So probably the most important thing you need to do, you drop your rod through in there like that. You're going to have to take the key, put it in your lock. When you turn this, there's a pin here. And this pin's got a position that you'll have to find where it pushes down flush. And then you can use the key pressure to kind of hold that pin in a downward position. That downward position on that lock is going to get you to this point. Your pin's right there. So you just need to get it where your pin's locked in. See it right there, it's locked in. Your key is stuck in your bezel along with your rod. So when you turn your key, it's going to turn that latch. And from there, you have a gasket. The gasket's got a groove cut out in it. That groove lines up with this groove. When you put it in there, it's going to look something like that. When you go inside your trunk, this bezel's going to go on here, this spacer. You get your washer and nut. And when you tighten all this stuff up inside the trunk lid, it's going to tighten all this stuff up to the trunk. So hopefully that'll help somebody right there. As far as this stuff goes, you put your bolts in it and it bolts up. You get a little adjustment here. You get a little wiggle in your bolts here. That stuff you'll have to play with. But this is the important thing. And if you get a trunk lock and you don't have any way to get this off, don't have a key, you're pretty much screwed. Unless you can get all this stuff ripped out of the center, and you can get in there and turn it with a screwdriver or drill this pin out from right here, and then it'll come out. And once you get all this stuff installed, guys, set that latch. Grab your key. Make sure it'll release. I like to do this a few times. Just make sure everything is kosher and happy. Because there's nothing worse, guys, than getting the trunk lid shut and not be able to get it open. So make sure all your mechanism works after you install the trunk lid. All the stuff went in there with no drama. The lock cylinder does fit a little loose in the bezel. It'll be fine. Over time, it'll corrode up like this one. And this bezel right here inside. And then it'll tighten itself right on up. But right now, it's nice and loose and easy to turn. So, let me get the striker on there. And I'll come back when it's time to adjust it. When your striker plate's installed, these things have a wild amount of adjustment, guys. Up, down, side to side. So what I'll do, I'll take this thing and I'll just kind of snug it up with my fingers. And I'll bring this latch down. And you can see up in there to a point. And I just want to make sure that when I eyeball this, we're getting close to where we need to be. Because this little guy right here is what latches your trunk. It hooks around right there in that groove. And that groove is right here. So you want it close to this, but you don't want it to rub it. And you want it just to grab just enough to pull this trunk down when it's latched to be flush. So eyeball it first, snug it lightly down. Don't cram it tight. Have your keys handy. And just move it a little bit at a time until you get the trunk to shut and fit like you want it to. And when you get it to shut the way you want it to, you should be something like this. Where this trunk shuts pretty easily. Now, keep in mind, it don't have a trunk rubber on it still. And that's some of our, but this thing don't take a whole lot of force to shut it. We're not fighting it, we're not forcing it down. You just want it to gently shut. And like I told y'all, this car is dirty. It's very dusty. Dirty. I know somebody said that there was a chip right here when I was putting that taillight in. There is no chips, it's just dirt. Lots and lots of dirt. And once you get the trunk rubber on it, you may have to do some more adjustments with the striker. But that's an easy way to get you in the ballpark. You really want it in kind of a neutral, you know what I mean? You don't want it to be tight when you shut it with no rubber on it, because then when you put the rubber on it, you won't get it shut at all, so to say. But you don't want it so loose that you can pull that trunk lid up and you've got to gap at your quarter panel like this. There is plenty of adjustment in that thing, enough for it to do it. So shoot for kind of a neutral zone, snug it down, don't cram it tight. I literally tighten this stuff with a 1/4 drive ratchet. It snugs up just fine. And that'll keep you from tearing paint off. So we'll get the trunk rubber on it later. I still got to get some glue to put the trunk rubber on. That's why I've not done it yet. But I want to try to get through some of these little smaller things that are super time consuming and eat up a bunch of time. That way I don't have to do it later. But my main focus is I just want to get some of the things on the outside of it to make it look better first off. And I want to get the interior back in the car before we start tearing in the engine in this car and seeing exactly what's wrong with it too, or what may not be wrong with it. So let me figure out what I'm putting on next. I've got a box of parts still. It's dwindling down, but I've still got a box of parts. We're going to move along. And like I said, I do have dash switches, and I've got a radio and a speaker and everything put in dash. But one thing I don't have yet is a interior screw kit. And all that stuff was mismatched or missing. So I'm definitely going to have to order one of those soon. We're going to have to get some sound deadening down in the floor and get the heater box and stuff back in it. But there's still plenty of stuff to do. And it's still, you know, finding out what we're missing as we go. And alright, it's the next day. So I got some dash switches and stuff that we need to start getting some of that stuff put in the dash of this car. So I know there's been a little bit of animosity in the background about some of the ignition switches and how all this stuff fits together, and some of it don't fit together well. So I ordered a couple of variations of bezels made by 2 different companies. I've got 2 different locks made by 2 different companies. And we're going to see if we can get all this stuff to actually work together like it's supposed to. So I'm going to flip around. I'm going to show you what I got to install. I've got everything but a wiper switch because I got the wrong one, because this one's got single speed wipers. Just so you know, if you got this style wiper switch, that's single speed. So I've got to get another wiper switch, but I've got everything else. I've got the headlight switch, I got the ignition switch, I got the lighter socket, and stuff like that we can get installed today. So I'm going to flip it around, I'm going to show you what I got, I'm going to show you the part numbers, and we'll see how this stuff fits together. For the ignition switch, I got the ACP one. Note where it's made. But it looks like a pretty decent little unit. We'll see how it fits. Got the ACP lighter socket assembly. This is the headlight switch retainer. I got this, which is another lighter socket, and the rest of the bezels, including our ignition switch bezel, our wiper knob, and the bezels for the wipers and the lights. This is the complete lock set that I'd bought that we put in the trunk. So there's an ignition tumbler in here also. This right here is our ignition switch spacer. And I've got an alternate bezel right here the Kentucky Mustang sells. It is a little different. This is a Daniel Carpenter one. That is the number right there. So I know there's some issues supposedly with Scott Drake stuff, and so I got a Daniel Carpenter one just to see how it fits. So let's see if we can't get some of this stuff installed. Now I'm going to start with the ignition switch. When this thing goes in your dash, guys, you're going to have this right here, and this thing's going to mash in here like this, and then your bezel goes in there and clips in. You're not going to put this together with the lock in it. That is very important, because if you put it together with the lock, you're never going to get it in your dash, because your lock cylinder sits over that lip in there. So I'm going to show you his old stuff, and we're going to compare these bezels right here. Let me take his stuff apart here. Everything as far as the switch, the spring, and the retainer looks the same. Okay, so here's a factory Ford bezel. You see cutouts in it. This is the Daniel Carpenter one, side by side. There's a difference right here. There's a little notch. Now, does that notch make any difference? I have no idea yet. The Scott Drake one is very, very similar to the factory one. Both of them right here, as far as cutouts go. So, I think I'm going to start with the Scott Drake one and see how it fits, and if it don't fit like I want it to, I'll change it to the Daniel Carpenter one. Because regardless, guys, both of these are made in China, and they're both significantly different. I don't think it'll necessarily make a difference all that much, but I will say this, the Daniel Carpenter one does look nicer as far as the quality of things, as far as the cutouts and stuff and the sides. That the Daniel Carpenter one is actually closer to the factory design, other than the cutouts in the areas that matter, to the factory Ford one. So let me see if I can get this stuff in the dash, and when I get to putting the ignition tumbler in, I'll come back, because the tumbler is where the issue with these come into play. So we'll just see what happens. Alright, I figured a problem out here. But these aftermarket switches, this is the factory one. And this is our Scott Drake piece right here. You can see the notch out right here. That's in between where your tumblers and your switch are made together right here. You can see right here, it goes down between there. With the Scott Drake one, there's plenty of room. Okay, this will go in there tight like it's supposed to. But when you put this bezel on the aftermarket switch, on that ACP switch, it partially blocks some of this groove. The aftermarket switch is thicker right here. And what that does, that will not allow you to put the key tumbler in there easily. And it makes it bind up. So I ended up putting the Dennis Carpenter one on there, and the switch went right in. With this one, it does not. So I'll flip it around and show it to you. So it's just one of them things you kind of expect, guys. Sometimes all this stuff don't fit together. That's been kind of the theme of this video. But I ordered both bezels and two different lock cylinders, just in case. So let me flip it around and I'll show you what I got. So I got it in the dash, and everything feels normal as far as one of these cars goes. So that said, guys, always back up and try to figure out why stuff don't fit. Whether the difference was a little bit in this tumbler, the bezel, and the switch itself. Moral of the story here is this Daniel Carpenter one, or Dennis Carpenter piece right here, this bezel, the ignition switch, and the tumbler come from Kentucky Mustang as a kit. And the kit stuff fits together great. The only two wild cards I introduced was the Scott Drake bezel and this aftermarket tumbler that come with our full car lock set, which makes it all one key. Those were the only two wild cards I threw in there to see if we could cause an issue, to make a problem, and what we'd have to do to fix it. So hopefully that'll kind of get you to a point where if this stuff don't go together somewhat easy, guys, it lets you kind of question it a little bit more, and hopefully it'll help somebody out. I did show you the difference between the Scott Drake and the Dennis Carpenter one as far as how they were designed. The Dennis Carpenter one does fit with the aftermarket switch a lot better than the Scott Drake one does. And another thing I should probably mention that will help somebody out is the ignition switch has a big and little notch that these twist into right here. Your bezel also has a big and narrow notch. Make sure you get those in there correctly, guys, because if you don't, this stuff will not clip together correctly and lock in the dash with the little tab back here. So just keep that in mind. So next thing I'm going to put in is going to be the lighter assembly. Like I said, it's ACP piece. I showed the part number a little earlier. These things are pretty simple, guys. It's going to go in your dash. The screws on the back side. I usually just take my finger and put in there and then tighten this up. This is meant to scratch the back side of the dash to provide a ground. These have an extra ground clip just in case you don't get it contacted. So that helps out a bunch. This is pretty generic to most cars, other than the long stud stuck out the back of it. And does vary from the one that was in the car, which I presume is the original one, because it has the extra ground strap. But this thing's in pretty poor shape. It probably works, but it's ugly and pitted. So I know I got a couple of doubles here, but I wanted to be able to compare the quality of the two and use the better one, the one that looks the best in the car. And the ACP one, it does have kind of a cheap Chinese looking stainless band right there, and the Scott Drake one does look a lot better as far as looking at it in the car. The elements are pretty much the same, not that you're going to use it for that anymore anyway, but they both seem equal. Otherwise, the chrome is nice on both of them. The only thing I don't like about the ACP one is the stainless. So I will use the Scott Drake lighter element with the reproduction housing. So I'm going to get this installed and then I'll be back. And somebody's been missing from this video because she's been asleep. It's Daisy. So make sure you check out her shirts down on our store below. And Daisy will greatly appreciate it, because with every purchase she gets more treats and more pets, and it makes her super happy, don't it? Huh? So I got that lighter assembly installed just like that, and I'll be hooking the wires up to them later. I'm just getting them in the dash where they belong. All that stuff's easily accessed through the backside. And the only switch that I'm going to reuse on this car, because it had been replaced and it looks new and it worked, is the headlight switch. However, everything attached to the headlight switch was in horrible condition. You see, they didn't care enough to you know, protecting this stuff when they done it. So we're going to discard this stuff, the nut, the bezel, and the switch. We're going to have to reuse this piece, and this piece is very important. You've got to have this spacer, because this spacer is what allows all this stuff to bolt up to your dash. But pretty much what you're going to do, get your bezel, you got your nut, you're going to drop it on the fender. But get your bezel and nut, and your stem goes through your nut, and it's going to fit tight because there's an O-ring in it. And when you put this together, you switch when everything's tightened up, and this can go in there deep enough. So what I was trying to get at, guys, was once you get this in there, it just pushes in and locks in. To get it out, there's a button on the back of your switch. Pull the stem out. Stem goes in. When you push it all the way in, it locks in. So as long as you get the right combination of your stuff in here, with your bezel and stuff, it'll all screw together into the dash. It can be a little fiddly, but it's not that bad of a deal. And once you get your switch installed, everything should be smooth. Everything should be tight in the dash. And one big thing to note, this ignition switch does not sit up and down. And there's that little horseshoe down there, spacer. The flat part points up. That's very, very important to note. This thing goes in proper orientation. There's a key weight lines up with your dash bezel. There's a key weight lines up with the switch itself. If you get it all out of wonky, it all won't line up. So I hope explaining this stuff a little deeper and showing you what I can about how it fits helps you come to a point where, you know, that you realize that not all aftermarket stuff is going to fit, guys, and it's not all going to fit correctly, and it's all on you to figure out why. So it may involve taking it apart and putting it together 2 or 3 times, or 10 or 12, or whatever it takes. But you just need to take your time, make sure this stuff fits together properly, and you'll have a trouble-free install that way. Compare this stuff with your original stuff if you have it. If you don't, you're going to have to do like I did and order a couple different brands or versions of stuff until you get a combination of things that actually work together. And I think this video has been a real good one, just showing the issues that we come into. So the only thing left switch-wise putting dash is the wiper switch. And unfortunately I don't have one. I need to order one. So I'm going to do that today. It's going to be pretty simple, guys. Wiper switch is just like installing the headlight switch, basically. They got a tool right here, and this does work on headlight switch too. And this tool goes in there. It sits in them little grooves, that bezel, and you can tighten them up. Alternately, on the headlight switch, you can use a large flat blade screwdriver. Make sure it fits in that very tight. But if you want to buy the tool, it's the wiper blade bezel tool, or wiper bezel stem nut tool as it's called. And this is the part number. I don't know if it's going to focus in on it. If it don't focus in the video, guys, I will drop a screenshot of it. But the SKU number is 15750 for the tool. They're pretty cheap. They're nice to have, especially if you mess with any of these cars. Well, it's another day again, so let's see what we can get done today. I've got some more parts laid out here, and I'm not really ready to put the glove box door on, but that's what we're going to put on next. I've still got the glove box insert. I need to put the heater box stuff in it and wire the radio up before I put the glove box insert stuff on it. But I've got the glove box door here. I can put it on the car and it's not really going to affect anything. So let me flip it around and I'll show you what I got. So what I got a GT style glove box door in which I put a curved style latch in. The reason why I do that, it makes it pretty much flush mount. When that thing's in there, it's pretty much flush. This is the part number for the glove box. This is Scott Drake unit. It is very nice and the chrome is very nice on it. So is the black paint. This is the glove box door that was on the car. I couldn't bring myself to put that thing back on there even if you repaint the black. The chrome on it is straight up hot garbage. And for a couple bucks I got a new glove box door cable too and a new set of screws so I didn't have to clean up and paint the old ones. So there's the screw part number that holds the glove box to the hinge. There's the part number for the cable with the screws and the standard latch right there. It is for the curved door, which is this style, but it will also work in a flat door and give you a flusher button mount. So I'm going to show you the back of the Scott Drake door. Other than saying Scott Drake right here, where our other one has Ford stamped over here, they're pretty consistently the same. And like I said, it's pretty nice quality. And we got our glove box door installed, guys. These things are pretty easy to install. What I used to do, I'll line them up with the edge right here. Flat, straight across. Put my screws in, and I'll see how it lines up. But got our new cable in there. This thing latches beautifully. The GT glove box just has a little more chrome around the edges. A little more style to it, so I thought it'd be a nice upgrade and don't really cost no more money than the flat glove box. So guys, I guess our next thing, I need to get this dash cluster in some kind of shape where it's actually usable. The cluster looked pretty okay in it for a pretty okay car. It was not really before. So I got some new pieces here and I'm going to flip around and show you. And we'll get into actually restoring the gauge cluster to an acceptable level for a car of a driver quality. So I've already disassembled the cluster. I've got his old stuff here, and as you can see, the chrome has went away on the pieces for your temperature gauge and fuel gauge. And somebody had wrote oil with an ink pen and alternator on the other side with an ink pen, trying to save this old lens, which isn't horrible. It's actually pretty decent, but not as decent as a new one that actually has the chrome and stuff on it. And actually says alternator and oil. This is a cheap way, guys, is to replace your bezel and your lens to make your car look better, even if the rest of your gauges are kind of iffy. So let me just set this on here and you can really see the clarity difference. But I'll give you the part number for the lens. The bezel is just a 64.5, 65 bezel. And that right there is the lens number. So I got the other stuff over here. I went in here and painted the backer this morning. I got the gauges cleaned up and they're over here just kind of, you know, in the heat drying out a little more. But we need to repaint these needles and we need to kind of shine this up a little bit in here. So I'll get in that a little deeper here in a little while. So with these small projects, guys, I'm just trying to come in here and give you updates and helpful tips. So let me know how that's working out and if you enjoy it or not, versus the time-lapse stuff where I'm speeding up what I'm actually doing. So let me get this old cluster bezel and lens out of the way. We'll bring our gauge cluster over here. We're going to paint these needles on the gauge cluster, and we're going to see what we can do about kind of the dullness and splotchiness of the gauges herself. And we'll go from there. So guys, if you need to paint your needles, there's a couple ways you can go about it. You can get you a paint pen, makes it easy. If you don't have a paint pen, you can take a piece of paper, stick it up behind the needle lightly. You do not want to damage this. And I've got a little orange paint here, and I'm just going to test the color out and see how I like it. And this is just an enamel. And it's probably going to be way too dark. And I don't really like it. So it's easy enough at this point. Just going to lightly wipe it off. And I'm going to go back and see if I can't find something lighter. So I went over there and got my paint pen that I usually use for stuff like this, and it is a little darker than the factory, but it does look alright. So that's what we're going to ride with on this car. So anytime you do this, guys, you just need to be careful. You don't want to bend your needle. It's just kind of fragile. We're just going to come in here and just lightly lift them up with a piece of paper. And we're just going to hit them with a paint pen. And while I'm not 100% concourse, it does look a lot better than what it did. So, get a little splotchiness in that lens. Well, not the lens, but the gauge backers. These things were in pretty poor shape, so I may stick the lens on it and see what it looks like through it before I go trying to spray some kind of clear coat or something on this to try to level it out. Because these printed letters on these guys are very fragile. If you spray any kind of degreaser or cleaner on this stuff, other than something extremely mild, you will wipe these letters off. So what I usually do, I'll just use some glass cleaner and I'll spray this stuff down, blow it out with the air hose lightly, because you don't want to damage gauges. And it's real important to make sure this white paint is in good shape, because that is what gives you your brightness for your dash lights. This one is an acceptable shape down here to be reused. So let me stick the lens on it and see if I can see any splotchiness in them gauges, and then I'll be back. And alright guys, assembling the cluster is pretty easy. You're going to put your lens in your bezel, just like this. Lens is just going to kind of sit down in there. And you have your trim piece right here. And it just kind of sits down in there. There's a screw that holds your trim on, or the cover plate, whatever you want to call it. What I'll do, I'll just kind of center the screw holes up as I'm tightening this screw down. Just kind of get it in position like that. I didn't paint the back of it, and the reason why, this white helps reflect your dash lights. That's why they do it. So if you were going to repaint the back side, you'd want to take these areas off and paint them white, or just paint the whole back side of it white. And then from here, I'm going to take our bezel and assembly at this point. I'm going to flip it around, and And I'm going to sit it on the cluster. Like this. And I'm going to hold the cluster in my hand. Get a couple of screws started. Until I kind of get everything in kind of place. And after I get a few started, I'll flip around and to see how everything looks. Make sure everything's lining up well. Looks like it is. From here, I'm going to set this cluster face down. I'll install my other screws. I'm not tightening none of them down yet until I make sure all of them are installed. And once they're all installed, I go in here and I'll snug these screws down in a crisscross pattern. I'm just snugging them up because you're threading these into plastic. Once I get them all snugged down, I'm going to make sure our cluster's sitting flush all the way around. And I'm going to flip it over and we got a nice looking cluster again. So, is it perfect? No, it is not. Does it look a lot better than what it did? Yes, it does. So, it'll definitely look a lot better in the dash of the car than it did before. And just kind of dress it up where everything looks nice. Sometimes guys spend a few dollars on the new lens and the bezel and just taking a few minutes cleaning stuff up and painting the needles even though it's not the correct shade of orange. They do look a lot better and it clean cluster up and it won't look out of place in a freshly painted car with a bunch of new trim stuff. So I've still got to put a few things in the dash like the heater box, the glove box insert, the wireless radio up and the speaker and a bunch of that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to install the cluster right now, but I am going to put the cluster in the bag that the bezel come in. Just a nice tip, you can go ahead and do this before your car's done and you can just put it right back in the bezel bag, take the bag up, and then when you get ready to install it, you'll have a nice clean cluster ready to go back in your car. And probably the last thing we're going to install in this video is going to be the floor hole covers, which are these little metal pieces right here. I did not get these from Kentucky Mustang because I bought them way back when I ordered all the floor pan stuff. So this is where I got them. This is the part number. Kentucky Mustang also sells these. It's also a good time to remind you guys they did send us a discount code, and it's down in the description below. CJ's ain't gonna send you one. Unfortunately, these come with your generic self-tapping 3/8 headed screw. Those are not the correct hardware for the floor hole covers. These are. And this is the part number right here. These are AMK. These are the correct style. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to install these. And you want to use a little bit of that strip caulk like I showed you when we put it around the windows in the previous video. Put you a little bit around your hole covers before you put them on your floor. So let me get these opened up and I'll be back, guys. I'll show you the proper orientation for them and how to actually install them. So these are going to come basically raw, guys. They are galvanized or aluminized. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take these over here and spray a little steel colored paint on them. Just give them a little better rust resistance than this coating. So I'll be back here in a moment. But it would be a good time to show you the differences in the fasteners. You see them side by side right there. That's a self-tapping screw. This is also a self-tapping screw. Just don't have that pointy tip that jab you when you're up under the car. Alright guys, this is going to be real easy. You got a new floor pan. Take these crappy screws. Make your hole. Run it down. You're going to put you some strip caulk around through here. I'm showing you dry. Raised part goes down. And once you use the crappy screws, you can take and put your good screws in. Tighten it down. So pretty simple little process, guys. Use the right screwdriver to put them in. But you definitely want to put a little sealer around them. If you get a car that you're going to suspect it's going to leak water, guys, you could technically put them in dry with hopes that the water would run out around them. But to do it right, you need to seal around these holes. Whether you use strip caulk, you use seam sealer, or something along that lines, you just want to make sure, like I said, unless you're worried about your car pouring a ton of water, to put them in with some sealer. It'll keep carbon monoxide out of your car and make the car a lot safer to drive around with the windows up. A little while later, I went in and changed parking brake handle. See, it's all bent and bad shape. I didn't cover changing it. These things are a royal pain to change, guys. If yours is in decent shape, paint the thing black and take your little white paint pen and paint the brake back. Super easy. But let me flip it around. I'll show you where we're at. And this is going to be the ending point for this video as far as that stuff goes. I am at the point where I need more stuff again to go further. So let me flip it around. So down there you can see our parking brake handle. It's easier to just take that whole assembly out, guys, drill the pin out of it, and then you can put your new one on. I went ahead and just stuck the other wiper switch in there to fill the hole where I could see how all the dash stuff fit. And I did drop a little Easter egg earlier in the video, see if anybody would notice. But I did put the wiper switch here. The headlight switch goes here. I put the headlight switch in this hole earlier in the video. How many of you noticed? Sometimes, guys, I put stuff in videos to see if you even notice it. So I think we're at a good stopping point. We got the radio glove box door. So I need to get the right wiper switch ordered. I need to get the heater box fixed and in the car. And then I can finish wiring the radio, put the glove box insert and all that fun stuff in. Unfortunately, you know, I don't have enough of a budget, his week-to-week budget, to order everything for his car all at once. So I try to order in spurts of things that I know I can kind of put together, you know, in one video for you guys. So I'm at that point. But our next video, we should be able to make even more leaps and bounds and hopefully get even closer to having the dash 100% complete, and hopefully getting some carpet in it. But we'll just have to see how things go. That would be where I would like to be in our next video. So if you haven't yet, guys, make sure you check out Kentucky Mustang. They have been nice enough to help us out and give you guys a discount code to use at KentuckyMustang.com. I'll drop the discount code down here, and that stuff will also be down in the descriptions as far as links go. So if you haven't yet, make sure you like this video, share them with your friends. If you're a new viewer to the channel, check out the playlist this car is in, and you watch it come from a horrible hacked up car flipper special up to this point. If you're not a subscriber, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's absolutely free. It does help the channel to grow. If you are a subscriber, I greatly appreciate you guys, and I look forward to everybody's comments down below. So until next video, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.